guys, it's June 15th, the Thursday before my typical bi-weekly delivery CSA that needs to go out tomorrow. So every other Friday I have 7 CSA bouquets that I need to make, and I deliver 6 out of those 7. And now every other week, so next Friday, I actually have 4 bouquets for pickup. Somehow I've just started accumulating additional people in my CSA program. I'm gonna talk a little bit about how I track those later on this video, but these weeks where I have those 7 bouquets are actually a little bit difficult for me to eke out bouquets, especially this time of year, especially given the thrips pressure that I've been having. If you followed me on Instagram, which if you don't, you should do here because I post pretty much daily on what's going on in the field, but I also did a video on thrips. I've had a huge infestation of thrips on my feverfew. So that's this patch over here, that's the patch over there, that's the patch down there. I was really counting on my feverfew for my CSA bouquets, but luckily I've had quite a bit of Yarrow and I have some Larkspur coming in. Now the reason why a week like this is difficult for me is because we had a pretty good or big week at the co-op yesterday. So what that means is that I had a lot of stems that I sold yesterday to florists at that co-op. And you know, to me it's a pretty lucrative co-op in the sense that I'm selling something like Yarrow for $1.30 a stem. It's hard for me to get $1.30 a stem in my current market bouquets and even in my CSA bouquets. That might just be how I'm making those market bouquets and how I'm perceiving the value of my bouquet. So, you know, that's a different story. But at the end of the day, I'm moving a lot of stems on Wednesday, and it really gives me a full day on Wednesday and Thursday for stuff to continue growing for me to be able to harvest on, we'll call it Thursday evening. So I need a harvest later today. I wanted a harvest earlier today, but some of the Yarrow just didn't look like it was ready. And I'm also supplying a coworker for her baby's first birthday, a bucket of blooms. So some of the shorter Yarrow and some of the other stuff went in there. So I focused this morning on that. But I thought I would take you along this week to show you, you know, I don't have a lot of focals. In fact, when I think about it, I haven't really had true focals since April when I had tulips. I had a little bit of ranunculus, but those stems, as you know, if you've been following me, weren't long enough to even use in bouquets. And maybe the campanula could be considered a focal. They were certainly unique enough to make a splash in a bouquet. But more or less, I've had a lot of spikes and I've had a lot of filler. So I'm going to work with those constraints and still make bouquets. And that's why I wanted to take you along with me. This is what I currently have in the garden right now. I am going to shoot what's in here. I'm gonna go work out and then I'm going to harvest after. The Yarrow is coming in. There's definitely pops of color everywhere. This isn't my only Yarrow patch. Luckily, I have another patch down there on the left. The problem with Yarrow is that if you haven't watched my video on Yarrow 101, you should, because something like this is ready to harvest, but I like to see some of the sides develop, because if I harvest it right now, this is not going to develop and it's going to wilt. So I'm going to have to cut this off. Something like this is great because it's basically a spray and it takes up a lot of space in a bouquet versus, we'll say something like this, which is obviously a lot smaller. So even though these are hypothetically ready to harvest, if I'm willing to sacrifice the sides, I want to give it a little bit more time so that I can, you know, fill up a bouquet a little bit more. And I think that a bigger spray looking piece of Yarrow looks a lot better than something like this, where I'll need a couple of stems to really make it look full. The one flower this year, well, I guess next to Sweet William, that's been a pleasant surprise is the Larkspur. I did not realize how much I would like Larkspur, and the colors have luckily been varied. So this is a purple blue that is very similar to the campanula that I grew, but I'm also getting some pinks, some lavender, some whites. You'll see them later in the buckets that I've harvested. I've harvested these very, very hard, and I also sold 2 bunches at this past Wednesday, and they went for $1.80 a stem, so $18 a bunch, which is, in my view, pretty good for Larkspur. And I still have at least 20 stems left for the CSA, so my customers are going to get it. Now, one thing to know about Larkspur, if you didn't know, is that it is also toxic. It is actually most toxic during its seedling stage, its younger stage. So if you have Larkspur in an area where you have livestock, make sure you cut it very, very aggressively so that it doesn't go to seed. And shout out to Jess for telling me this yesterday, because I actually had not realized how toxic it was, especially in that seedling stage. So, something like this is also going to be ready to harvest, although it's a very strange bud with how it's aggregating at the top. But what I loved about this Larkspur is that I got so many stems off of even just one plant. There's a lot of side shoots. I think this is maybe about 20 Larkspur in total, and I've gotten at least like 30-40 stems out of this, and there's still some that are blooming right now. One other flower that's going to make its way into my bouquets are Nigella pods. This is bonkers. I've never grown Nigella. There were literally like 7 plants here. Now, the problem with Nigella is that you get one central stem with all of these side shoots that are not long enough, again, for bouquets, but long enough for mason jars. So I'm actually on the fence right now as to whether or not I make bouquets or if I just make mason jar arrangements. I have mason jars basically at the ready if I need them. The thing about my Nigella is I noticed that there were some thrips on my Nigella. I didn't even know they liked Nigella. I mean, from my research, thrips will basically eat anything with pollen. Like, they're the cockroaches of flowers in my view. But the great thing about Nigella is obviously after the petals fall off, you can use the seed pods. So I'm going to be growing a lot more Nigella next year, even though it gets very, I guess, weedy is the word. People kind of liken them to bachelor's buttons where they become really unruly and hard to harvest, but I like the fact that I can still use the seed pods, and I have a much bigger window in terms of how I can use them, and I know that they will sell pretty decently at that co-op, especially if I wait till the fall to sell and use these seed pods. Very quickly, here are some snaps that I was also counting on and looking forward to. I mean, look at this stem length. However, if I open up the throat of this, you can kind of see it, but there's thrips in there, and I'm done. I'm not going to really even bother with these snaps, which is a shame because these were a later succession that I put in. I put them in March, and I had thought I could potentially escape the thrips, but they are here, and they are here with a vengeance. You can see them crawling all over on this white one. So this is the what is this? This is a group 2. This is the Maryland series, so that's why these are blooming relatively quickly. And then I've got some Potomacs over here, and I think these are done too. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut these off and just let them chill out until the fall, because in the fall I have a much better time with snaps and not having thrips in those snaps because it's gotten cooler and thrips like the hot weather. The final ingredient that we're gonna have in our bouquets are sea holly. I have a really hard time saying the Latin name of it, which is why I'm not even going to attempt, but they are starting to blue up, which is nice. I'm gonna see how the stem length is. I mean, for most of them, I can cut them down to the very bottom and get some sort of, bouquet length stem off of them. So like this one over here, this is pretty long, and that would be good. So you always want to wait until the bracts are blue, which this one is. These aren't over here, but it's fine because I'll just snip these off. And yeah, this should be a good just pop of color in the bouquets. And I am also going to cut these, which are wild chives that have been growing my walkway. I haven't weeded, and they started flowering. And so when you're desperate, you basically use anything you have. I have seen people sell stuff that I've just been putting into the compost pile at my co-op. In fact, yesterday I saw someone selling bunches of vetch. They sold. I've been pulling my vetch out and just putting it into the weed compost pile. So this, I think, is actually kind of cool. It's technically an allium, and yeah, it'll give it a good pop and spike of color. So sorry that this is not focusing super well, but hopefully you can see it now. this is like inadvertently turned into a farm tour, which is not the purpose. But the last thing before I go work out is my lilies. I thought they would have been blooming by now, but they're not. So we had a really sunny weather, and all of a sudden now it's like days of cloud and days of rain, which is fine. We need the rain, but I was really counting on these lilies over here for my CSA this week. I'm hoping I'll get it for next week's pickup CSA, but if not, at the very minimum, I should get it for the week after. So in 2 Fridays from now, hopefully I will have lilies for the final bouquet of my spring CSA subscription customers. Well, good morning, everyone. It's the day after. It is a nice 54 degrees right now. I did not get a chance to harvest last night. We ended up doing a lot of other stuff, and I got really tired. So it's about 6 a.m. right now. It's actually perfect timing to harvest, especially the Yarrow. It was nice and cool last night, so I'm not going to be worried too much about them needing to condition and rehydrate. So I'm going to harvest, have some breakfast, and then make some bouquets. So this is what we just harvested right now for the CSA bouquets. I've got the Yarrow, some sea holly, and Nigella pods, and then there was one stem of verbascum that looked really good. That's the bucket for the baby shower, so very similar in terms of the types of flowers. And then here is the Larkspur, which is looking really good. So I'm gonna let this condition, gonna have some breakfast, and then I'm gonna start making some bouquets. All right, so I've finished my coffee as well as my breakfast. This stuff has been conditioning for a little bit over an hour. So here's the blooms, and we're gonna start making bouquets. So I have no idea what this bouquet is going to look like. I really have like 3-4 ingredients, and none of which are a traditional focal disc. And the reason why I wanted to put this video together is because I was talking to a local grower. She has really great design aesthetics, but what's limiting her from taking more orders right now, in fact, I think she canceled a recent order, is because of a lack of the traditional focals. And she even had ranunculus. I think the deer ate some of her roses, and she put together a really beautiful bouquet with Madame Butterfly. It was some ranunculus buds and Veronica, and then she had some hydrangea. And I think she was a little bit afraid of how the hydrangea would hold up, especially since she harvested so early. But her arrangement looked beautiful. She could have taken out the hydrangea, and I think that just having the Madame Butterfly with the ranunculus and the Veronica was perfect. And one of the things that I emphasized to her was that a lot of these customers that I've realized, they don't necessarily know what a focal is. They just know that it looks good. So does it matter if it looks good with multiple Madame Butterfly spikes, or does it matter that you have a ton of focal discs? And the other thing is that no one's ever going to find a Madame Butterfly type of snapdragon at their grocery store bouquet, or even their florist, right? The florist needs to be able to source Madame Butterfly, and it's hard to find those kind of snapdragons through wholesalers when they're importing them in. So part of the novelty, at least for my CSA customers, is seeing flowers that they normally would not see. They're normally not seeing Yarrow. No one's importing in Yarrow. I would say that Larkspur, sometimes they would see it, but you know, a lot of it is really us introducing them to different flowers, and they love the fact that every other week the bouquet is so different, because obviously what's growing in the field today is going to be so different than what's growing in the field in 2 weeks. So I just want to emphasize that sometimes, you know, you can get away with not having all of the right ingredients in terms of making a full bouquet. It's really nice to have. It also depends on your goals and objectives, right? If your goals and objectives is to provide a really premium looking bouquet, and you really value that design aesthetics is something you want to be proud of, that's a different story. But if you're growing flowers and you're missing something here or there, and you're afraid or intimidated of selling something, I just want you to get out of your comfort zone and tell yourself that it's okay if the bouquet it doesn't have the right traditional ingredients, as long as it looks beautiful. That's really what people care about. So I'm gonna start putting together these bouquets now. The Yarrow is going to be a predominant filler, I guess, in this bouquet. So we're just going to start layering in the Yarrow. So I'm just gonna do probably groups of 2 for the Yarrow, and then I'm gonna continue layering in my spike here, which is the Larkspur. So, you know what? It's already looking pretty. And then let me put in a sea holly over here. This sea holly is still a little bit immature, but I think it should hold up pretty well. All of the post-harvesting books say harvest when everything is blue, but this is so hardy that I'm thinking that the side shoots, even though they're green, should be fine. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, where else? I have some really good stems of the Yarrow. My problem, or the limiter, is my stems of what do you call it, of Nigella pods. They're really short, so I'm still on the fence as to whether or not I need to make what do you call it, vase jar arrangements. So this is kind of like a trial first for me, and I'm doing the spiral method right now, which means that it's going to be a lot easier for me to fuss around afterwards and adjust the height of stuff, because right now the height of stuff is just not very good, but that's okay. So do another one of these. Then let's see if I can get a Nigella pot in here. Oh my God. I really should be sorting these out a little bit better in terms of having them vertical on the ground or on the table, but I've already started. And I want to pump these out because the baby's sleeping right now and I need to be delivering in about an hour and a half-ish. All right, so I have my bouquet. This is nowhere near ready because of where the stem placements are. So just gonna start pulling stuff up. Go, there we go. And I think the Nigella pod is a little bit out of place here, so let's put this over here. I try to make sure that when I'm doing the spiral method, I'm not just randomly inserting in a flower here or there, because then it makes it difficult once you break the spiral to adjust. See, the Nigella pod is so short that even if it sticks up, this is where the stem ends, which is fine because this is a very, very long bouquet right now. So I'm okay with that. All right, so I'm gonna put another piece of Yarrow over here, and I think we can call it quits after. Let's see. There we go. 2, 3. Actually, I don't like where this one is, so I'm gonna adjust it. I feel like that bouquet making is one of my biggest weaknesses, and so it's something that I am trying to deliberately practice every single time I make these CSA bouquets. But hey, we all have our limitations and weaknesses, right? So there's always something to be mindful of and to practice on. Here we go. The Larkspur might be a little too high now. Don't put it down a little bit more. It's like you don't want the Larkspur flowers to get caught in here, but you also don't want it to be so high that it looks like it's like towering over everything. So I think this is a decent height, and I'm going to cut it and then rubber band it, and I'm gonna make a bunch of these and then wrap them all at once. I'm gonna put these on a time lapse. So let me actually put the rubber band on here so you can see what it looks like. There we go. So yeah, once these are wrapped, it'll look better. And then this is how it's gonna sit in a vase. I think it looks pretty good. I am actually one bouquet short. I need to harvest a little bit more yarrow. I have enough Larkspur and Nigella, but I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. You let me know what you think. So I'm at my computer right now, and I do want to spend some time showing you how I keep track of my CSA customers using an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheets. Now, I want to emphasize that this only works because I don't have a ton of CSA customers. We're looking at like 12, 13 people. If you had, I would say, over 24, this starts getting a little bit unruly. Still possible, but smaller numbers definitely make manual tracking of CSA customers easier. So you can see over here, I have the subscription type. I have two types of subscriptions. One is a full share, which is 6 weeks or 6 bouquets. It's every other week, and a half share is 4 bouquets. The reason why I do every other week is because I do expect my bouquets to last for at least 10 days, up to 14 days. And many of my customers have said it's perfect timing because they throw out the bouquet the day before. It gets them basically to that 2-week mark. So I have the name, I have the email. The email's there, so that way when I email the customer the day before, I can just copy and paste it. I have a column here for pets and kids, and that is really important for me because if they have curious pets who might eat flowers or very young kids who might accidentally eat flowers, I will not include things like foxglove. This week I included larkspur, and I told them up front that, hey, I'm gonna have larkspur in here. When lilies come, I will make sure with these people, are you okay to receive lilies? A lot, like everyone actually had at a certain point received tulips, which are technically also toxic, right? So I think there's a range of risk here, like foxglove. I absolutely do not want to put into bouquets where there's that possibility. And then, some of it is also just educating and making sure people are aware of what stems are particularly toxic. And when I email people the night before, I also make sure I include that kind of information as well as a picture of what larkspur is in this case. But more importantly, if you look at columns E through J, I have the weeks laid out and I have the dates. So anything that's in gray is a bouquet that's already been fulfilled. Anything that's in that dark red, it just means that they don't have those 2 weeks of share. So looking at this, I can see how many more bouquets I have left per person. And it really helps me keep track by person how many bouquets are left and make sure that, I'm on top of things instead of needing to go back to my messages and my emails and Squarespace to figure things out. So I hope this video was helpful for you, especially if you are in a stage right now where you have blooms, but you're missing certain ingredients. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to finish editing this video. I'm gonna get the baby up and fed, and then we're gonna go deliver. If this video was helpful for you, definitely like the video, subscribe, and I have started a Patreon. So this Patreon is going to have articles that complement certain YouTube videos, and I'll also post some updates just, you know, what I'm doing on a daily basis. So they're not going to be every single day in terms of those updates, but a lot of times I post on Instagram stories, and I find that people have a lot of questions, or, you know, people really engage with those stories. The problem with that is that it disappears after 24 hours. So you can't search for it. So I think Patreon will be a good place for me to house all that stuff. So for the price of a really good cup of coffee, one that I probably made at home, you can get access to this. So it's $5 a month, US dollars, and the link is in the description below. So I hope you'll join me on Patreon. I'll see you in the next video.